So there's a practice that some people are following today, and maybe you guys are, of what they're calling spontaneous baptism. Now, baptism we understand from the New Testament. Spontaneous means like immediately, and I guess that kind of sounds like Acts 8,
Yeah.
the Ethiopian eunuch, or maybe Day of Pentecost, Acts 2. But then there's a long Christian tradition
Yeah.
of, you wait a year to Easter, then you baptize everybody at Easter in the early, medieval period, and then in evangelical churches, often these days, you'll have some classes you go through first and then get baptized. What do you think about this current big practice of? I was talking, or Rick Warren was talking to me in a group that I was in the other day, and he was talking about how he does these baptisms just immediately. I mean, literally, he told me a story about somebody just walking up saying, "Hey, I've just come to Christ," and Rick talking to this guy who he was just baptizing, who, in sharing his testimony, this guy who walks up says he'd come to Christ, tells this guy he just baptized to baptize this guy then, just
Sure.
walking up. Darrin, what do you think?
I wrestled with it because a couple of my friends, I was pretty shocked when they started doing it. And so I began to ask questions and actually kind of thought about it, prayed about it, tried to study. I mean, you look at the text you mentioned, and then, maybe even the Acts 16 possibly with, the jailer and his family. We came to the conclusion that we felt like it was, something to pursue. And so we just kind of experimented with it. And ours is a little more, we want a conversation with a person. We want to hear them articulate the gospel, explain why today they would do that, want to make that decision. And we have seen it really, I want to be careful with the language, but revivalistic kind of feel to those services where people, spontaneous celebration, people praying afterwards, and it's just been really interesting. I mean, the event is cool. Obviously, baptisms are wonderful, but what it's done to the congregation has been pretty impactful.
How long have you been doing it?
I think about 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that every weekend or is that planned? Okay.
No,
So kind of spontaneous.
Well, they're in this. There'll be planned baptisms.
Okay.
And then we'll invite people.
Okay.
Hey, here's the water.
So you do a mix.
Yes.
So if Tom says to you, "Hey, I came to Christ at a Bible study last week," and he's telling you this on Thursday, what do you tell Tom to do as far as baptism?
We wouldn't do it that weekend necessarily. We plan baptism. Our situation is our largest congregation doesn't have a baptistry. We have to do a portable, and it's a little bit of a
Is that
deal.
because it's formerly a Roman Catholic church?
Correct. The one you were in. Yeah. And so it's very difficult. We got to arrange things, and then service structure. So we have set times that we do that. Now, if we had a standing baptistry, I don't know how we would handle that. We don't feel the need to get people wet immediately at all. It's just the idea of did regeneration happen in that person's heart? Did they confess their sins and believe the gospel? Why not? If they can articulate the gospel, and we tell people no all the time. So people come up, Matt and I were a part of an experience that we could share at another church, but we want to make sure they really understand. Yeah.
Don't name names, but share the experience.
Yeah.
Wow, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, it was. We were at a conference, and we were asked, they were doing a baptismal service outside.
A spontaneous baptism like you're talking about?
Well, actually, it was a plan.
It was planned, but then there were other people that were able to join in on that.
Yeah.
And
kind of like what you're talking about.
Yeah, very similar. And we were asked to baptize.
Yeah.
And I wasn't comfortable with it, and so I kind of walked back and didn't really do it. But some others got tasked. I think you got tasked.
I got tasked.
And what was one of the?
Well, we were standing in the water, and there's one of the pastors from that church where the conference was being held, and then me, and a little girl came up. I say little girl, she really was probably 12, 13, so I don't know if that qualifies as a little girl, but a young lady came up, and I just asked her why she'd like to be baptized, and she told me her mom had been sick, and she almost was, totally confused at what this actually was. And then, so, at that moment, I'm tapping out, but the pastor's looking at me going, and I'm just like, hey man, I'm not baptizing this girl. So then things got really, really awkward. Well, he baptized her, and then I got out of the water and went. And so I've seen this kind of fire up in the last couple of years, and I've seen some people do it very, very well. I thought it was very, very well, and then I've seen some people that make me really nervous. I'm hesitant to do it in Dallas, and my reason for being hesitant at this point is that I'm already dealing with a massive population of people who think they're saved because they did get baptized without understanding it, without understanding the gospel, without there being any fruit in their lives, and so I find this collision between the text. I can find this collision between Cornelius's house and Pentecost and the eunuch, and I mean we can go on in Acts, and then this reality that I'm constantly having to deconstruct people's baptisms to help them understand they're not saved because of that baptism, and so that's made me timid. I don't believe sinfully timid, but I do feel the tension in it because I can see in the text, and I'm well aware of dangers, but I want to be as aggressively obedient to the text as I can be with a full knowledge of the dangers and try to do what I see while at the same time building some barriers against the dangers. But that would be kind of where I land. I would love to do, in fact, one of our elders brought up this very topic a couple weeks ago, and I said some very similar things where, man, I love the idea, to see people just boldly go, you know what, I didn't come here dressed for it, I didn't come here ready for this, but I gave my life to Christ a couple weeks ago, and man, I'd love to do it right now.
And I think context is interesting because I'm in an area with hundreds of thousands of Roman Catholic, basically that have rejected that, and when they come to be baptized, for a lot of them and their that is a big deal. In other words, it is going to be a family disruption because of them being baptized, because parents take that, grandmas take that as you're rejecting your upbringing. And so for us, when I see that, I go, not that sincerity or you can't judge the heart, but you just go, man, that's costly for you.
Yeah.
Not maybe like a Muslim situation where you're going to be totally and utterly rejected, but this is costly for you. And so I can appreciate what you're saying about where you're at. I think that context might have some bearing on elders as they consider this.
Mm-hmm. Well, because if I ask someone if they're a Christian in Dallas, more than likely they're going to tell me when they got baptized. Mm-hmm. They'll say, when I was 11 years old, I went to RA camp, and there was a sketch about one of my friends being drugged to hell by angels after they died. Why didn't you tell me? And I didn't want to do that, so I gave my life got baptized, but no fruit, no loyalty to Christ, but that's why I'm saved, because I was baptized at this point. And so to have to work so hard to deconstruct that while carefully taking care of the assurance of others who literally have given their lives to Christ and been faithfully baptized is a tension that I feel like I'm almost always walking in.
Yeah, I think that because I'm going to assume that if you're baptized, you should take the Lord's Supper, and only those who are baptized should take the Lord's Supper, and that the only people who should take the Lord's Supper are people who have a credible profession of faith. I'm going to assume that only those who have a credible profession of faith should be baptized. So I'm going to be also more cautious.
Yeah.
So I think, Darrin, I think what you're saying is wise. If I were in a context of persecution, particularly in some hostile, if I'm in North India, where people are reluctant to be baptized, in a Muslim context.
Hey, do this. I don't mean to talk over, but I think this would be helpful for people who watch this. Kind of flesh out a bit against the argument that you're going to have false converts anyway, and so since you're going to have false converts, why don't you just go ahead and baptize whoever wants to be baptized and let the Lord handle that? Because that's the argument. If I say what I just said to some of these guys that are doing this, I mean that's what I would get. I mean, you're going to get false converts anyway, so why in the world just try to bring in as much, cast the net as far as it'll go and see.
Well, the net of the gospel, I do think we want to cast as far as we can. But then a baptism is a step more than that. That is publicly affirming that someone has responded to the gospel, and you assume in a saving way.
Yeah.
I gave an address at Together for the Gospel called "False Conversions: The Suicide of the Church." So people could watch that and listen to that if they wanted to. But I think when you realize what a tremendously confusing thing it is to falsely assure somebody of their salvation, Now, we're never going to know perfectly, so none of us are going to be in a pristine position. We're all,
Yeah.
it's a spectrum. It's not so much an on-off switch. Because, what Darrin's talking about isn't entirely spontaneous. He's got planned baptisms. Then he talks to the person before they're baptized. It's not quite what I represented in that opening story. And then on the other hand, what I'm saying is I'm going to do more just the planned baptisms in the context that I'm in. But if I were in a situation of persecution, maybe I'd be thinking differently. But because I think, at least right now in the United States and where we are, the kind of people we see at our church, there is still the possibility of people responding falsely and in considerable numbers when people are at a young and impressionable age, that I'm going to err on the cautious side because I'm going to think that the church that has fewer false conversions will be a more powerful witness and a better advertisement for the gospel of Jesus. Yeah.